This week, Mark Boltz-Robinson, the manager of the ADRP team at Trellix, is here to talk about the state of the SOC. Next up, Dr. Haneen Salem, a managing partner at Novus Consulting Group, will discuss K-12 cybersecurity attacks and so much more. In the security news, military intelligence. We should have been doing that already. Chrome updates, an exploit for the firewall, racing the kernel. Creepy spyware goes away. Weaponizing security complexity. The same old tricks still work. The largest crypto hack, suing journalists, targeting your battery backup. The teenager behind Lapsus. Spring exploits just in time for spring. And hacking your Honda Civic. All that and more on this episode of Paul's Security Weekly.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly.
The need to communicate and collaborate on a global level has created a proliferation of cloud-based tools for businesses. But with new channels come new gaps for hackers and many new security blind spots. You need full threat visibility across channels with a solution that works at the speed your company does. Perception Point's multi-layered platform provides the most robust threat prevention on the market. Perception Point advanced collaboration security designs for the modern enterprise. Visit securityweekly.com/perception point.
And welcome to the show. But first, let me introduce you to a man who enjoys an occasional finish him in a game of Mortal Kombat, Mr. Paul Asadorian.
Welcome, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. It is episode number 734, being recorded on March 30th, 2022, right here in G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island.
Did your voice just crack?
Right here. Mr. Larry Pesci is here with us.
Yes, I am. Back after what, a 2-week hiatus?
2-week hiatus. You're back in studio.
Yeah, I had way too much fun over those
We had
last 2 weeks.
all kinds of people coming in studio.
Yeah.
Mark Boltz-Robinson's right here.
Mm-hmm.
How's it going,
Good
Mark?
to be here.
Welcome.
Good. Thank you.
We'll get to your more formal introduction momentarily. I'm going to introduce our remote hosts. Mr. Josh Marpet is here with us.
If I'd been thinking, I would have had a Gregorian chant for the Finnish hymn.
That's right. It is a Finnish hymn. Mr. Tyler Robinson is here with us. Tyler, welcome.
Thanks. It's good to be back.
Mr. Lee Neely is not here yet, but I heard he's threatening to come on the show, and I hope he does, because we love us some Lee Neely.
And he's got an amazing new headshot.
He does?
Yeah, in the show notes.
In the show notes.
Yeah, amazing new headshot.
Oh, because he can do that, because I fixed that bug. How about that?
Some people
That's right. That's right. Let's see. Do we have an announcement? We must have an announcement. We always have an announcement. We're announcing stuff. Security Weekly listeners save $100 on your RSA Conference 2022 full conference pass. The RSA Conference will be held live in San Francisco June 6th through June 9th. 2022. Security Weekly will be there in full force, delivering real-time live coverage and interviewing some of the event's top speakers and sponsors. To register using our discount code, please visit securityweekly.com/RSAC 2022. Use the code 52UCyber. 52UCyber. We hope to see you there. I won't see you there because I won't be at RSA this year. Because it overlaps my son's birthday. And so, duty calls for the family. Mark Boltz-Robinson is been in information security for about 30 years and is currently involved in building a security operations center for a large organization with established infrastructure and teams already in place. Going to explore, this is what my teleprompter says, the state of the SOC today, the challenges of building one, the reality versus expectations, roles, what is SOAR'ing and not. Mark, again, welcome to Paul's Security Weekly.
Good to be here.
It is nice to have you, my friend. How did you get your start in information security?
Oh, I actually fell into that after college, working part-time at the College of Business at Penn State many years ago, doing networking, actually installing token ring adapters in faculty and staff member workstations way back in the day.
That was popular in the 90s.
Yes,
I
it
want
was.
to say.
Yes, it was.
Because I also did token ring.
Yep.
How many times you break the ring?
Then you had to go
3
find
or
it.
4.
Then you go-
Yeah,
and then
find
you
all
go
the
for
tokens lying on the floor.
Yes,
Yep.
yes.
No, they
Users
get lost in the
screaming.
Ethernet.
Yeah.
Yep. So,
And you had what was the clearer thing? It was the thing you put in the port to clear the something. I don't remember.
I just called the token zapper, but
token zapper. Yes, it's exactly what it was. It's
yeah.
not like the token
like
was
reset.
trying to,
Yeah, because the mouse and cows, the
Yes.
ports were basically
cows.
big relays, and you just had to get
reset
something
the
to
relay.
pop the relay
Right.
switch to get it back in place. So,
Mhm.
Yep. Yeah, lots
Those
of fun.
are fun times.
Yeah, and so sort of one thing led to another. I ended up with StoneSoft, a Finnish company, doing firewalls, VPNs, and all kind of network security stuff for many years. Went on to SourceFire for a little bit. Taught Snort rule writing, Cisco AMP, what is now Cisco AMP,
Gotcha.
all that, and then ended up at
Marty used to teach
yes.
for SANS.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I
right.
had him as an instructor actually way back in the day.
Yep. I think my only SANS instructor was Mike Poor.
Yes.
Taught the intrusion detection class.
That was
It an
after,
absolutely
yeah.
amazing class.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That would have been, depending on when you took it, it would have been track 3
Mm-hmm.
or
Mhm.
Sec 503.
I think it was track 3 still. Yep. It was early enough to not have the collegiate monikers
Yep.
to them.
I think I took it when it was Stephen Northcutt, Judy Novak, and Marty Resch. Did they teach that class
They
together?
They did, I think,
'Cause
and
I
they
think
also
Mike
he
wrote-
wrote the book. I have an
Yes.
autographed copy from Stephen of the intrusion
Network
detection
intrusion-
book.
Network
Yeah.
intrusion signatures.
Yep.
I'm credited in one of those editions
Mm-hmm.
because Judy wanted something I was working on. I was like, sure. She gave me credit in the book. It's awesome.
Yeah. So, yeah, and then ended up at McAfee after they had acquired the StoneSoft firewall technology.
Yeah.
And they needed people to do that, and I switched to the consultant life at that point. And yeah, one thing after that, and then I ended up on what was the Foundstone team. That's been now the Advanced Cyber Threat Services team, and McAfee is now Trellix, or a piece of McAfee is now Trellix, and
Is that the whole? Yeah, it was tough to keep all that straight.
yeah, they basically had acquired a bunch of stuff, and then they were public, then they were private, then they were public, then they split up into pieces. So like this year, I think they just announced that some of the cloud stuff, the CASB technology
Yep.
and stuff,
Yep.
is now Sky High Security,
Mm-hmm.
which is
That's what they
sort
bought,
of what it
right?
was
Yeah.
in the first place.
Right.
They added security to the end of it, so
Right.
it's a little different. But anyway, yeah. So then they did all of the stuff that's sort of the XDR endpoint
Mm-hmm.
stuff with sort of EPO in the cloud. I think it's now going to be the Trellix Policy Orchestrator.
Gotcha.
Is now all part of Trellix. And the Foundstone Consulting, the vendor agnostic piece that we
Mhm.
do, which is great because I don't have to kowtow any particular product or technology. I say what I honestly think about different things and look for where folks make mistakes with what the heck they configured. And when things go wrong, we do forensics to figure out that, no, you really should have had these 3 settings and you shouldn't have allowed the malware to uninstall all the endpoint security with no password or any protection. Like,
That happens.
how did you think that was a good idea?
People don't actually do that.
Yeah. So, yeah, and now the latest project, as you said in the show opening, is working on building a security operations center for a client, which is, you think, okay, starting a security operations center from scratch, that sounds like a lot of fun, but it's like an organization that's been around for quite some time. They're very large. They've got little fiefdoms everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
They've got different teams doing stuff. They've changed sort of the structure of the teams in the last few years. Now everybody's like, are you looking to put me out of work? You know,
Yeah.
there's
Well, I guess we should maybe back up and let's talk about what a SOC is and what does it even mean these days. I think it's
Mhm.
an even better question.
It's those
right?
things you wear on your feet, right?
That's right.
Yep.
That they used to give away at conferences when we went to those things more regularly.
darn tough Vermont, best socks on the planet.
Oh, really?
Yep.
I love SOCs. And security operations centers as well.
SOC.
You can have them 30 years. If you get a hole in them, you send them back to darn tough. They send you a new pair.
Wow.
Nice.
Well, that assumes that you can find them. I mean, let's be honest.
By
you know,
that time,
socks
by
are-
that point, at least one of them's a lid to a Tupperware container you no longer have.
been carried off by the SOC gnomes.
That's right. Yeah.
So, yeah. So I think.
Have you seen Carson Zimmerman's? He came out with a new edition of his book. Do you know the one I'm speaking of? 10 Strategies for a World-Class Cybersecurity Operations Center?
I have
Something like
not seen. I don't think. No, I can't say that I've seen the latest version. If it's something fairly new,
Yeah, it just
but
came
I
out
have.
3
I
days
have
ago.
seen that the 3 years ago version. I did.
No,
flip-
3 days ago.
Oh no, that no. Like a year or two ago, I think I flipped through that.
Yeah, that was
So-
the one that came out like 5 or 10 years ago from MITRE. MITRE actually still gives it away, I believe.
Yeah.
But he just came out. I just saw it on Facebook. Carson came out with a new edition, and he said this time he had a lot of help. It's a huge upgrade, so just a thought you might want to check it out.
Absolutely.
Carson's brilliant guy.
Yeah. I don't profess any brilliance to the idea of SOCs. I just have my own experience and ideas from my perspective. That's kind of what I go off of. Just wing it.
Okay, so what are the worst parts of setting up a new SOC for somebody?
I think actually nothing at all to do. Well, I guess two things. The first is you're dealing with ingrained political structures and the current state of affairs of the way people are used to doing things. And change is hard. And then secondary to that is that figuring out how to get people to use technologies to adapt their processes to new things, as opposed to I log into this console every morning and there's 6,000 alerts, and I sit there and I go click, 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 click through the alerts to see if there's anything interesting, whatever interesting means. And I go down a rabbit hole here and a rabbit hole there and get stuck in a quagmire, and I've gotten 500 alerts out of the 6,000 done, and I go home, and then tomorrow morning I come in and there's 6,500 alerts in the console that I need to take a look at, and I start the whole thing all over again. And getting people to say, hey, maybe you shouldn't be doing that. Maybe you should try something different. And then a lot of it is also coming back to the question of even what is a SOC. I see a lot of cases where people forget that the S in SOC is Security Operations Center, and people want it to also be the Network Operations Center, and they're doing the network uptime monitoring.
SNOC?
Yeah, you can have a SNOC, and I suppose if you actually called it that, then it gets more like the Calvin and Hobbes, where he's enamored with the word smock. Like
Yeah.
Smock, smock, snock, snock, snock.
It's a fun word to say.
Yeah, it is.
It is.
I should have wore a smock. I think I had a Stonesoft smock at home still, actually. Anyway, so it's this sort of trying to, you put everything and everybody in this one room with 30 dashboards, and everybody's got like all their, Chrome tabs up with the different consoles, and they're trying to make sense of billions of alerts these days, and not even stepping back to do the fundamental things of, well, how do we actually do the useful thing and find the bad person that's doing stuff in the network? And
That term operations in SOC is really overloaded, right?
it is. It's carrying a lot of weight.
Yeah.
A lot of weight.
There's
The only part everybody gets correct is the C. It's a center. They try to put everybody in a room, and they put the big screens on a wall, which is kind of cool about this project is they actually specifically stated they want this to be virtual, which is interesting.
a virtual SOC.
A virtual SOC, yeah. They're not actually going to invest in
VSOC.
a room with lots of big TVs and stuff, but everybody's got their access to the different dashboards, and I guess everything will be Teams meetings and stuff. So,
well, I mean, a big part of the problem right now is getting people to, running a SOC or being a SOC analyst takes a certain set of skills, and hiring those people right now to be in one geographic location is almost impossible. It's or requires a significant amount of money. That's a lot.
Right. Yep.
So virtual SOCs are becoming more and more popular, just like remote work is becoming more and more popular.
Yep.
Well, I mean, honestly, that leads to an interesting question. Can you extrapolate? What do you think is going to happen 5 years from now?
If I had to wager, I would say that it's probably going to, I think there's going to be I'll call it maybe 20% that go back to their existing investment of a center somewhere where there's a big screen TV and stuff. Because that's what they were used to. There will be organizations who will reopen offices and people will go back to doing what they did before. Even if it's just out of a sense of wanting to quest after normal, after all of what we've been through these last 2+ years. So, but I do think that some are realizing that, well, we're not really doing any worse than we were before with everybody being remote. Not necessarily doing any better with everybody being remote. It's certainly not costing us a lot of money for everybody being remote. So why don't we just keep doing remote? So I think we'll probably have some that will stay remote, and probably more will start to look to build remote, virtual, if you will. Yeah, I do think that, as in the Discord there, the distributed microservices, et cetera, blah, 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 is probably, something that's still going to take some time. But I think we would sometimes forget about the exponential acceleration of technology, too. So I think if you're asking 5 years out, there will probably be quite a bit more virtual. So
I want to dig in on the word operations for a moment, Mark, and
sure,
because that means when we think of a SOC, it's more than just operations. Like operations kind of applies that they're following a playbook, a process, and getting information from point A to point B, which is certainly part of that. But there's some engineering and analysis and data collection and a lot of other things that have to happen in order to support this SOC function. Is that another team, or is the SOC just the operational arm of your security team?
Well, that's why I kind of think that in a sense it's a poor moniker to begin with, because you're absolutely right that people were looking at it as a security, the security operations had long been focused on, we make, look at firewall logs, we make firewall rule changes.
Yes.
We maybe put in some ACLs and some switches and routers, and it evolved out of network security, so it tended to have a network-centric perspective to the operations initially. But a SOC today is not, that's like a tiny piece of the overall puzzle.
Right.
Like, yes, there are still orgs that still leave a gaping wide hole of everything outbound from 0 to 65,535 TCP and UDP. You can head out to the internet freely and whatever, and it's a huge mistake, but organizations do that.
A lot of them do.
But at the same time, a SOC today is usually actually should be doing analytics, threat hunting, threat intelligence. I actually prefer and lean towards wanting to do more with threat hunting, because the alerts that are in the consoles, they're so overwhelming now that, like, where do you even begin with that? And yes, you can and should work on cleaning up your logging. I tell people, go all Marie Kondo on your logs, damn it. Like, does this log bring me joy? And if not, toss it out. Like, why are you logging 65,000 switch port up, switch port down logs every day? I don't care about that.
The same reason we don't throw away any kind of computer cable, because we might need it someday, Mark.
Yes. Okay. I think there's, from a security point of view, though, I think there's a lot more information to be had on the endpoint side of things now, though. Personally, my take is we find more effect in stopping ongoing bad things and preventing ongoing bad things by focusing on what the endpoints are doing in the first place. And what happens on the network is sort of tangential to that. It's less relevant.
But much like cables, though, if I throw it away, I'm going to need it.
Yeah, it's like the laptop bag I brought my laptop in. I've got a Cisco dongle cable for a Cisco console for switches and routers. Like, why am I get the last time I got rid of it. If I
have a problem with my switch, knock on wood that I don't, I might need to borrow your console cable adapter.
Yeah, and it's the last time I got rid of it, 2 days later, whoops, guess what?
Yeah,
I actually leave one hanging in the server closet. But
Yeah.
That reminds me.
Otherwise I lose it.
Yeah, I had an experience like that just a couple weeks ago. That the Verizon router that bridges our Ethernet to the cable for the Mocha information for the channel guide stuff, and that broke. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. I get a spare. And not 6 months ago, when I did a big clean out this summer, I threw the spare away. I had to buy another one off of eBay.
Mm-hmm.
Every time.
So we've got actually a question on Discord. Mark, your opinion on SIMs and SOCs, where they're going. Will they move to XDR style solutions, or whether SIMs are going to stay but expand with SOAR or some other technology?
I guess we should start by the difference between a SIM and XDR solution, how SOAR plays
And about
into
the 5
mix.
other things that people call SIMs that really
That
sort
really
of aren't.
SIMs. No, I
Start
agree. There's
there.
like
I set up
Start
this
there.
syslog server. It's ingesting logs from 60,000 systems, and it's doing really good at it. I have a petabyte of data to comb through using grep and sednoc, which
That's
actually
how I started.
would be more effective
Right.
in some cases than some of these SIM
that
technologies
is how
today.
I started. I mean, I literally syslogged everything I could to a giant Linux server and did exactly.
I've
grep
had
log,
some
right?
incident response cases in the last few years where the clients have provided me firewall logs, for example, and I'm like, for the love of God, just export. I don't care what the firewall is, just export it in CSV.
Yep.
And give me the file. They're like, there's no way you're going to load this 35 gigabyte file in Excel. There's not enough. You can't do that. And I'm like, I'm not loading it in Excel. I'm going to put grep sedoc, blah, blah, blah. I've got a regex just for IPv4 addresses.
Yep.
That I have in my little notepad, and I toss that in, and boom, I get the IP addresses, sort, unique.
Yep. And
Done.
those tools are fast.
They're fast. Yeah, I'll have the output of that in like a minute. Like,
but sometimes, like back in the day, I would run those tools. I'm like I wonder, is this faster if I did it in Perl or Python or used some other tools? And then I'm like, no, actually, those old school Unix tools are super fast.
I literally just have like a little like VI edit scratchpad text file that I just have them all in, and I just copy them each time I need them, and I don't bother writing a script or anything. I probably could, but then you have to think about like, well, how do I parse the file name, and how do I do this? And,
Right.
And I got to put in error checking. Oh God! And now somebody's gonna want me to document this damn thing, and it's like
it becomes a project, and you create a GitHub repository, and then you're gonna get pull request, which would be, I mean, actually probably a good exercise to go through. But now you're not just using that tool for yourself; you're supporting it for other people, which isn't a bad thing. I mean, you should do that. But
we have like we have a triage collection tool that we created for forensics and incident response cases where it goes and it gets the most salient artifacts that I'm interested in to understand what the hell's going on in this ransomware case or whatever this adversary is doing in the network. It's a bat file. I mean, nothing crazy, but it's like I want something that can run on pretty much any Windows system, and it borrows, some sysinternal suite and Nearsoft tools, and it gets me what I need. It does it in a consistent way according to the order of volatility, and it's a bat file, and it works. And it's like, why would I want to make something more complicated?
Well, because you need PowerShell. Clearly, you need PowerShell, Mark.
Right.
Mark, you don't have a cool name for it. There's no fancy logo done by an incredibly expensive graphic designer. There's no GUI with fancy graphs, and there's no pew-pew map. How can you even call yourself a responder if you don't have a pew-pew map?
Right.
Come on, man.
Yeah, I'm sorry. My bad. But
So is SIM really just a place to store the logs and attempt to give the user?
It can be a place to do research. It could be useful. The problem is that I see that most of them, they're not really actually terribly good at even log collection. You want like Windows event logs. Now that Microsoft's actually investing in Sysmon, we're making some progress there.
I'm told Sysmon is pretty amazing to. I mean,
it is.
Talk about the SOC and
it
analysis,
beats
right?
the like when you had to do like either WMI calls or the WEC-WEF garbage and stuff like that, which is like a lot of overhead for no good reason. different SIM vendors, of course, make their own little collectors that try and toss things in like syslog format.
Endpoint vendors would do the same thing, but like then Microsoft, just use Sysmon to do that.
Yeah, but then you got to figure out, well, is it actually parsing things right? Because I want to ask significant questions like, show me all of the 7045 Windows event IDs for the last 2 weeks. I want to see what new scheduled task creation. Yeah, I want to see what are the new scheduled tasks in the last 2 weeks, because there really shouldn't have been any.
Right. Unless they were hacked, in which case there probably is.
Yeah. Yep. So I think it's an interesting thing then to for SIMs, if they're done right, and if you're not. The other mistake is that once everybody gets a SIM, the first thing they do is they start saying, we want all the Windows event logs, and we want all the syslog data from all our Linux and Unix systems, and let's take the firewall logs and throw those in, and let's take the IPS logs and throw those in, and let's send all the switch logs and send those in, and you just start inundating this thing. And hey, congratulations, you have yet another thing that's trying to deal with 3 billion messages a day. And it's not going to be terribly good at it. You're not going to be terribly good at it. You're probably looking at all the top 10 charts, which, by the way, guess what? The interesting thing is happening in the bottom 10.
I was going to say, the more data you throw at it, the less useful that top 10 list becomes.
Right.
Right. Yeah, I like least frequently occurring versus most frequently occurring if I have to have a choice. Yeah.
Least frequency analysis is just about anything. You find that one WinWord exe that's got a unique hash in your entire environment.
Right.
I'd be like, I want to take a closer look at that system. Not the 30,000 other machines that all have the same hash of WinWord exe, for example. Like
even outside of Windows and outside of Windows too, from my research and talking with people, like well-tuned Sysmon, some beats that are tuned for specific style events. Maybe something like a Wazoo, even open source.
Yep.
Like targeted things with targeted events going back, right?
I like OS Query. I like Wazoo. Yep. Both. They're both useful in their own regard. I like OS Query because it's sort of cross-platform, and you can sort of write it in a SQL-y kind of query language if you want.
Query, it stores it on the endpoint.
Yeah, that's like part of the problem. Is that
a problem or it's a double-edged sword?
It is a double-edged sword. Yeah, because one of the things we've seen is adversaries lately, meaning like 2021. They pay attention to what we do as responders, and they look at they're looking for the MFT, and they're looking for the prefetch if it exists, and they're looking for the Windows event logs, and they're going to go through those and figure out what I'm doing. So I'm going to use VSS admin and blow all that crap away. I have a data point that the Windows event logs are gone, but now I don't have the Windows event logs as a responder to go through. They've blown it away, and so
attackers increasing away. What you're saying is they're just blowing away the logs.
Yeah, they're blowing away the logs. They're destroying the MFT or time stomping the crap out of it. They're effing with the data that we need as responders. And
anti-forensics has been around for a while, though.
It has, but interestingly enough, everybody, because there's different levels of practitioners, right? There's us, there's people who are hopefully listening to this podcast and are watching it, and there's also a lot of the other people, the other 80% that are trying to figure out what to do every day from a security point of view, that don't understand that. And the MITRE attack framework, to my knowledge, still does not list anti-forensics as a tactic. They have anti-defenses. But anti-forensic measures as a tactic and a list of techniques, to my knowledge, does not exist in the current attack framework.
That's interesting. So can you pull those events off fast enough from the endpoints to not have them stomped on? Or does by nature it cache some of those on the endpoint?
I suppose you could. I think your bigger problem is going to be on the collection side.
No, they have it.
They do? Okay, that's good. That's news to me too. Like I said, I only have my own piece.
So. No, I apologize. I got curious. I went looking. It says indicator removal on host, time stomp. So it's a defense evasion tactic. Hang on, I'll throw it in Discord. You can.
Right, that's a defense evasion tactic, though. Do they actually have using or destroying the VSS admin, the shadow copies, the just blow away the Windows event logs entirely? It really should be its own tactic at this point, because there's 5 or 6 good techniques that they're currently doing.
To attackers,
so they have an indicator removal on host, which is clear Windows event logs.
Okay,
clear
cool.
Linux
But they
or Mac
consider
system
that
logs, clear command history.
Defensive. Yeah. Okay.
And that's in the attack framework. That's not the defend.
Right. Do you find the attackers are clearing out the OS query wazoo beats kind of stuff?
I haven't seen enough organizations actually figuring out how to use that.
Yeah,
so
it's interesting.
I mean, if I had to actually, I can't do it for this SOC project, but if I could do a SOC of my own, I would probably actually build it almost entirely open source, to be honest.
Yeah.
I would have the Hive Cortex, MISP. I would have
Security Onion.
Probably, Security Onion will even give you some of those things even. I think that they don't include MISP, but they do include the Hive and Cortex, and you get actually Playbook and a bunch of other cool things too, and it has OS query and Wazoo.
We
and
had Doug on the show not that long ago and did a webcast with him too.
And the improvements that they've made are amazing, and of course it throws in Kibana with some other elastic bits, and you can do some beats and stuff, and I would probably do more of that plus just sort of general more open source type stuff like a Kibana dashboard. Because what I want out of a SOC, ideally, in terms of a SIM, where a SIM can be useful is as a research tool, as I said, where you should be able to go in and actually do questions like, okay, these 3 IP addresses are talking to that thing C2 over server, that C2 server. What else are they talking to?
Right.
And who else is talking to that C2 server that I haven't identified yet?
And what process
and what process on that is responsible for that communication?
That's something Doug has in the Security Onion. I asked him that specifically, was he dug into the process and said, it's this process. This process is touching these files, right? This process is touching this registry entry. Well, wow, now we've got a pretty clear picture, something really bad
and there are some, there are commercial tools that are starting to do that in the XDR space as well. Trellix has that with their XDR, EDR. I think SecureWorks does as well to some extent. I haven't explored too many XDRs lately, but they are getting to that point where you can start asking those kinds of questions. But on the other hand, it's all the other knowledge that SOC analysts also have to have in terms of just fundamental analytical thinking. That's not a guarantee. But also with the analysts in asking those questions and stuff, I had a thought here. It's sort of running away from me. Where was I going with this?
About the analysts and about open source and about building a SOC and
so the profit. I think it's the keeping up with all the other things we need to know. It's a broad field. Don't ask me anything about relational databases. I don't do relational databases. Database security, database anything. I will start falling asleep if you start talking about key fields and table blah 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 whatever. But for example, I had a colleague recently ask me. They said, "Hey, there's this new process called Calculator EXE, and it's doing networking." And the EDR says this is a bad thing, and I'm like,
probably.
Well, maybe, but no, because with Windows 10, Microsoft renamed the executable. It's no longer calc.exe. It is calculator.exe. It's a Windows widget or whatever they call that. The crap they stick in that directory they don't want you poking around in anymore. And It actually does do networking.
Because it needs to get updates because it's an app?
Well, no, it's because within the calculator app now, they actually have the ability to do currency conversion. So if you need to do that, you need to be able to get the latest currency rates. And it has a little update rates, and you click on that. And of course, it's going to do networking at that point. But a lot of EDRs are thinking that calculator is the de facto standard for testing hacking tools and stuff. So if calculator is doing networking, that's a bad thing. Yeah, except it's not. But you have to know that. Or you have to take the time to research it.
Right.
So, yeah.
And that's where, it's interesting in the SOC. What rabbit hole do you go down?
Yeah.
That's one of the hardest things.
Yep. So, in that case, it said, hey, let's, enumerate the good, enumerate the bad. I forget which we were supposed to do.
Chris Brenton once gave a great, not necessarily an analogy, right, but explanation of what you're talking about right now, Mark. And he said, if you think of all the events on your network and you gave them a rating from 1 to 10, 1 being the most benign, normal thing that could ever happen on your network, and 10 being, oh my God, we're hacked 6 ways to Sunday, that most analysts can quickly identify the 1 through 4 and the 7 through 10. It's the 5s and 6s where we need the most help and should be spending most of our time. And the tools should help us the most with that middle of that kind of bar scale, right?
Yep. Except the tools usually actually aren't focused there, in my experience.
The tools will tell me that 1 through 3 is benign, and 8 or maybe 9 and 10 are really bad. The rest is up to me.
Right. That they're actually focusing you in that middle ground, which is not where we need the humans to be doing the work.
Right.
We need the humans to be doing the work on,
or the opposite. They're focusing on the fringes.
Right. Sorry. That's the way I meant to say it. Yeah.
And leaving the rest up to you. Exactly.
Right. Whereas we shouldn't want the human beings in that middle. We should have the human beings at the 7, 8, and 9 and 10.
Right.
And that's the only place that we should be focusing our efforts.
Yes.
Sadly, that's not the case in most cases. Coming back around to analysts, too, it's another fun story that I like to tell because I like telling stories. And for the analytical thinking piece, it's also interesting, even as practitioners, how many practitioners that are SOC analysts or even just in information security, don't really practice logical fallacies, analytical thinking. We tend to love going down rabbit holes because it's not so much about the logic and the analytics. It's about
curiosity.
The curiosity and the puzzle solving.
Right.
Which is not quite the same thing, in my view. And what I mean by that is...
Wait, what did you say? The logic what now?
Logical fallacies.
Yes.
Yes.
This could never happen because, or this should never happen.
I can't believe this is possible, that this thing could be taking place, because I can't believe it, that's the logical fallacy of incredulity. You think that because I don't personally believe it could possibly be true, therefore it can't be true.
Like calculator.exe should never talk out of the network because I never believe that to be true.
Right.
There's just no situation where that could happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Except there is.
And
it's another case. One of the best
unintended functionality.
Yeah. One of the most interesting incident response cases that I think I ever had doing forensics on a client that had 38 Windows servers in an environment. Client was US Canadian based. The server farm was hosted by a company in Australia. 38 virtual servers. Windows stood up, secured supposedly, updated, etc., put online, managed by another third-party service who then subcontracted to another party to do the actual day-to-day management. Well, to make things easy, because they were based in India, they had RDP open to RDP and to manage the servers. And
because
of course
so much easier.
So much easier. Yeah, RDP is encrypted, so it's secure, so there's no issues there whatsoever. And of course, eventually all of the systems were bricked by ransomware.
Right.
And they wanted us to figure out, well, what the hell happened? And so in taking a look at that...
That's a quick report. What didn't happen?
Yeah, The funny part about it is everybody assumed that there was a threat actor.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't. There were two.
Oh, jeez.
I eventually managed to prove to a reasonably high confidence that two different adversaries had gained access using RDP brute force attacks. One was using the 38 systems for coin mining. The other was using it with a bunch of different hacker tools to scan and attack other systems on the internet. The coin miner got pissed off that the other person was consuming their mining resources to do these other scans and attacks. So out of spite, they detonated. They didn't even care about the ransom. They detonated the ransomware just to brick all the systems and say "F you" to the other guy.
Sounds like I was in university. I ran into similar situations where I'm like, no, wait, there's more than one attacker on your like. You're not hacked once, you're hacked twice.
Yeah,
if not 3 times.
Yeah,
but that's the kind of thing. I mean, when I talk about like logical fallacies and analytical thinking, you need to really kind of make sure that you follow sort of the Sherlock Holmesian principles of just look at the actual facts and don't make assumptions on what those facts tell you, but just look at what the facts themselves can demonstrate and focus on that. And then that actually also helps, coming back around to the idea of a SOC. In a modern SOC, I think we need more instruction from the analytical side on training on actually like, these are fallacies. Don't fall into these traps. And if you don't fall into these traps, you won't fall into those rabbit holes when you're actually doing your analysis on a day-to-day basis, which means you can help correctly pick where you're spending your time on the 6,000 alerts that you have to deal with that morning.
Those preconceived notions
they'll get you every time.
Every time. Every time. Whether it's troubleshooting or incident response or whatever it is, it's very similar.
So coming back around to the operations question, and we're sort of going...
We're all over the place. It's good, though.
Yeah. So there's...
Wait till we have some whiskey. We need whiskey.
Feed Mark whiskey.
I'm a little parched.
Mark brought this fabulous whiskey. We do only have 12 minutes until we have to the next segment, though. And then after that...
faster.
After that, we can talk about the news when we're good and liquored up.
Sounds good. So I think that just quickly touching on the operations piece, I think that I guess my final claim of what I'm hoping to do with the project I'm working on is making sure that as the SOC becomes part of this organization, that it is more focused on the threat hunting, threat intelligence, not to be confused with threat feeds. And the proper analytical thinking, forensics and incident response should definitely be part of a SOC as well. I think that kind of does belong there. And
I was going to ask
I don't know what a SOC ends up being called anymore at this point, because it is doing all of those things. I mean, it is security. Technically, it's operations, which is where we get the SecOps.
How do you feel about having offensive personnel involved in the SOC?
I personally think that is absolutely a key thing to be part of it. I did work on one of the previous SOC building projects I did work with. We made sure to include the red team, if you will, the offensive security side. And it proved useful when, especially as a gauge of the maturity of the analysts and helping them to actually hone their skills. Because one of the other challenges we have is SOCs have, like you said, they have the people that sit there and they're the playbook monkeys that sit there and they just go through the wiki and they follow the steps on a given playbook to do something.
Which isn't bad.
No, there's useful bits of that, but at the same time, you need to be able to have a little bit of creative thinking as you're doing some of the analysis work. And to do that, you need to repetitively train on it. It's the same way, like I was talking with Spanzer at one point about actually doing a talk. I was going to do it at Security B-Sides DC, and I hope to still do it at some point, actually talking about information security and how it parallels emergency medical services. And part of that too is you got to keep training on that. You can't just do CPR every 2 years for your certification and then
I think
a year and a half into it, you're like trying to remember, okay, how was I supposed to do those compressions again? You have to practice it all the time.
I think Rich Mogul.
We should mention that Mark actually started B-Sides DC and is currently an EMT, so he knows about both of those topics.
Oh, there you go.
Yes.
So do you know Rich Mogul? Because he's an EMT as well.
I think I met him once or twice.
Yeah,
I don't remember the context,
sure.
but there's actually quite a few people I'm learning within information security that are also in emergency medical services. It's kind of an interesting thing. But anyway, the idea is you need to practice these things. So with that SOC, coming back around to the red team question, sorry that took so long, the red team helps the defensive practitioners work with their skills and make sure that the defenses are up to date. Because if you can set a defense and know that that's something you don't need to focus as much on, it helps you focus on the other things that you do need to focus on. And it seems sort of intuitive, but in a lot of cases it ends up overlooked. Previous client I helped build a SOC for and helped them really sort of get better at their security. They started off where the red teamers could come in, some guy would jack a laptop into some random switch part in some conference room in the building and start Nmap scans and Metasploit and all the other fun stuff. Kali Linux.
You'd be surprised how well that works.
And they sat there for like 3 days.
And no one noticed.
And nobody noticed. And after about 2 years of working with this client, making multiple trips out there, training them on the basics of forensics, incident response, analytical thinking, how to sort of triage alerts. Hey, think about the bottom 10 in addition to the top 10 and, kind of dig better and tune these alerts, get rid of that garbage and everything else.
Turn off the Ethernet ports in your conference rooms.
Yeah, turn off the Ethernet ports in your conference rooms. Some fundamental things like, or 8021X or something. Yeah. I don't know. But
practice defense in depth. What?
Yeah, what? And then they did all that. And then the red teamers on the SOC team then did the same kind of exercise again. And they nabbed them not only in like 15 minutes instead of 4 or 5 days, but they actually knew exactly which conference room they were sitting in.
Yeah, that's the key.
And that was a world of difference in that 2-year span of where they were to where they are now. And
unleash the poisonous gas in that conference room.
Yes.
You also want to ensure you're keeping your incident responders and your offensive people in communication and utilizing them for incidents, because I'll tell you, no one knows their tools better than good red teamers. I'll say not everybody knows their tools and they don't do a good job, but I can tell you just about which way that an IOC is going to be left behind and which ones are good for OPSEC, which ones are not, where to look for things, what certain files are named by default. All the little tips and tricks that a red teamer does is also useful for hunting and finding evil if you're in the middle of an incident or you're trying to figure something out. So keeping up to date on that offensive mindset goes a long ways, making sure that those teams are always melding and in constant communication.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I always tell people, take everything I've taught you about incident response, these tools to collect these things, the MFT, the prefetch process list, etc., whether calculator talks to the network or not. Do all of that on a known good system and store the good clean artifacts so that in a library somewhere, so that you have those as a reference set to see if I'm looking at a process list, I'm trying to spot the malicious rogue garbage process, what does a proper good process list look like? And if you don't do that all the time, practice with those red teamers doing that kind of thing, you're never gonna remember that. And you're going to be sitting there and you're going to end up like Google fooing on like processlibrary.com, like 15, 16 different processes trying to figure, and then find out that they're all benign because they're all Intel driver crap for the Bluetooth adapter or whatever.
I love that.
Because they named it IGXPT something or other because that had something to do with Bluetooth. Right. So,
Yeah, and there's also ways to run those tools as well. I remember when I was doing incident response and forensics, you'd want to load it from a USB drive, not trust the internal process explorer. It depends on how advanced your adversary is, but they could hook certain calls or something, right, and show you a view of the process that.
Yeah, that's why I tell people make a known good tool set. Mm-hmm. That's part of your thing. It's on a USB drive. Our triage collection tool is exactly that. There's a tools folder.
Yep.
All the tools are actually renamed, so they're all prefixed. So when they show up in the artifacts, you know that was your tool, not some other tool. And it's my Process Explorer
not eating your process by name.
Right. Yeah. So all those little tips and tricks, and that's all experience, it's all training, it's all doing it over and over and over again.
Hey, Mark, I got to tell you, we've got like a half a dozen questions in the Discord chat. I know we don't have time right now, but if you don't
have
mind
it open, I'm more than happy in the next phase to step back and try and scroll back through and try and answer some of them as best I can.
That'd be awesome.
I did have a question about how do you retain talent in your SOC, right? Because maybe simplistically, but oversimplified, is that you've got your level 1 analyst, your level 2 analyst, your level 3 analyst. From level 3 analyst, I go into security research, and then I'm not involved. Like, I get further and further away from those daily operations. So your talent, what you're just describing, the experienced and practiced practitioners, they're like, oh, I'm in security research now. I don't do the operations because I don't want to work the third shifts and do the daily operations, which, believe me, I totally understand it. But how do we retain that talent back into the SOC?
I think that the researchers really should never actually leave the SOC, in my view.
They should be in.
They should be in there, and they should be the mentors. There's no reason that they can't, on the day shift or whatever shift they prefer to work, that they couldn't be on that shift in the SOC. They're not digging in all the consoles, but people can be bringing them, hey, I'm wondering about, can you help me with this?
Right.
At the same time, they can be doing research and disseminating that back to people as well. And, working on that so that those people, like when they say, hey, there's this thing's triggering, all of a sudden we've got these indicators that are triggering for this new ransomware, and they're triggering in our things because we just got this update from this threat feed, which is not threat intelligence, and
I like the terminology and distinction. It works.
And saying, oh, well, the security researcher, the bearded guru sitting in the corner is like, oh, my young Padawan, that is actually the 127.0.0.1 loopback address. It inadvertently made its way into the threat feed yet again. Mm-hmm. Let's make sure we automate the tools or figure out how to fix the script that's supposed to yank that sucker out of those feeds in the first place so it's never an IOC.
Mm-hmm. There you go.
So, yes.
It's good. It's good. How do you deal with the communications between the different groups in the SOC? You described a scenario where there's an organization and it's grown to a certain size that's not small anymore, and there's different fiefdoms, different groups, and you're trying to wrangle all those cats right into a SOC. What are some ways you do that?
I think part of it is showing each of them what role they have to play, because they are intertwined and they are all important. The threat hunters cannot just be off threat hunting on their own without any of the inputs from the 3 levels of analysts, or however many there are, and without the threat intelligence people saying, we've dissected these latest US CISA threat advisories and we've determined this, and based on our threat models there's this risk, and go forth and hunt for that. Like, they need to work together, and showing them all that they have an integral role to play within the organization, that security operations isn't just going to be level 1 analysts going through click on alerts, and then going, oh, that's an interesting one, send that to level 2. And level 2 sitting there taking the smaller subset of alerts going click. And, it's not just that. It's so much more. And so everybody's got a role to play. There's important parts. And then the really mundane crap that nobody wants to do, like once a month at least, every SOC should start with a team meeting to say, what crap are we doing this month on a day-to-day basis that nobody wants to do?
Right.
Can we automate that? Can somebody take like the next month and write a script, a Python script, something that does API calls or whatever it is to figure out how to get that thing so that's something we don't do anymore. Let the computer do that.
Speaking my language.
Yeah.
Okay, so but you're actually saying that people have time to do that when they have 6,500 alerts to go through every day? What's wrong with you, man?
Well, the thing is that those 6,500 alerts are not that important.
You heard him. He said it.
Yes.
It's true.
Just had to feed him whiskey first.
It's good whiskey, too. This is
It
one
is.
of my
It's delicious.
favorite distilleries from Vermont. It's got the 14 stars, the Green Mountain Boys battle flag logo, plus it's also the field of the Vermont Republic flag.
It seems like it's a relatively new distillery.
It is.
That it is labeled as batch number 2?
Yes, it is. It is batch number 2. There's another one that I have. I was thinking of bringing Ridgeline. It's from the Appalachian Gap Distillery, and they're up to batch 20 now. But they're also doing really good stuff.
It is really good.
But this one I find
Flavors.
just a little bit more drinkable. There's something more to the flavor of this one.
It's like
just
oak and some fruit kind of notes in there.
Mhm.
It's very good.
Is it a sweeter whiskey or tell me?
A little bit. There's some hints of sweetness, certainly.
Okay.
Yeah, not super
not
sweet.
as sweet as the sapling that's sitting over on the other part of the table there.
I
which
saved
is
that
definitely
one
not.
for later. I thought
Definitely
we'd go.
not.
Yeah.
You start ending down the tiki drink routes with the sugar and
With the sweeties.
That's
yeah.
going to be more.
We
on
get
the-
sweeter as the show goes on, perhaps. Well,
Because the sapling's actually also made with maple syrup as part of
From
its
Vermont.
distillation process.
so stay tuned. We're going to bring out our next guest and continue to sample some nice Vermont whiskey. So stick around.